Gene Hackman's funeral was more than a farewell. It was the final curtain on a Hollywood tragedy. Hundreds gathered to mourn, yet how many tears fell for the man he truly was, and how many for the secrets he carried to the grave. The exchanged glances, cold handshakes, and whispered conversations in the back, were they fearful of his death, or of the secrets he left behind escaping into the world? That funeral was not merely a time of sorrow, but a tremor that shook an entire industry to its core. Up near Santa Fe Summit, a wooden house with a dark tiled roof hidden behind ancient pine trees had been the quiet haven where Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa spent their final years together. The atmosphere was eerily silent, as if even the wind paused in this place. No one could have imagined that behind that weathered wooden door, the life of a Hollywood legend would come to such a tragic and baffling end. On February 26th, as the last rays of sunlight stretched across the iconic red sand hills of New Mexico, a local police team and forensic personnel stormed into Gene Hackman's home at the urgent request of relatives. The reason was clear. Gene and Betsy had been unreachable for days. Neighbors, used to their reclusive lifestyle, initially ignored the silence. However, when mail piled up and calls from California went unanswered, an unsettling unease began to spread. The front door stood unlocked, yet inside everything remained impeccably arranged, as if the owners had only stepped out for a brief moment. There were no signs of disturbance or violence. Every item, from the armchair Jean cherished for reading to the ceramic mug Betsy frequently used, stayed precisely in place. A silent, damp odor emerged, a mix of rotting wood, medicine, and an unnamed mystery. The main bedroom, where the couple had once rested, still glowed with a warm yellow light, as if time itself had paused during their final moments together. No one could tell how long they had held hands, only that when discovered, their bodies displayed a unique state of decomposition, a natural mummification brought on by the dry, cold air of the highlands. They hadn't collapsed abruptly, but appeared to lean on each other gently, as if crossing the boundary between life and death with quiet resolve. Gene Hackman, the man who once graced the Oscar red carpet and stunned the film world with his natural, powerful acting, spent his final years like a shadow after leaving Hollywood in 2004. He nearly cut off all contact with the media and old friends who sent letters or even flew to Santa Fe and knocked on his door. All met with polite silence. Only Betsy Arakawa, his wife of 31 years, served as the sole bridge connecting him to the outside world. Once a concert pianist, Betsy retired from the stage after marrying John, becoming his silent companion. Santa Fe residents rarely saw them in public except during early mornings when the couple drove their silver SUV along Mountain Road. Jean drove, while Betsy sat quietly beside him, simply listening to the classical music playlist she had compiled, with Clair de Lune often being the last tune before they turned home and ended their silent cycle in their final days. Gene had battled heart disease for many years, and the old pacemaker in his chest had worked tirelessly for over 15 years. Doctors advised him to replace it, but Gene refused, saying, "If it stops, it stops." Betsy knew that his greatest fear was not physical pain, but the thought of leaving before she could hold his hand one last time, before their final embrace. No one witnessed that moment, and no one knew exactly when it happened. Only the silent walls held the memory. When the Santa Fe forensic team entered that room, time seemed to freeze. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting shadows over the two silent figures together, a somber echo of Clair de Lune reverberating through the desolate Santa Fe mountain. The closed gate of the wooden house on Santa Fe Summit not only separated Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa from the outside world, but it also became an unseen barrier that kept even their closest relatives at bay for years. The Hackman family had grown used to that quiet way of life, where all news about the Hollywood legend reached them only through Betsy Arakawa's gentle, soft voice. She never raised her voice or exaggerated. She simply conveyed what needed to be known, and for the family, knowing that Gene was all right was enough. Tim Hackman, Gene's nephew, had visited Santa Fe a few times, yet the iron gate was always firmly closed. Their rare conversations, when they occurred, were always through Betsy's phone. Tim wasn't upset because he understood that his uncle had never been one to share openly after leaving Hollywood. Gene Hackman was like a mountaineer who had reached the peak of fame and then quietly retreated to his own peaceful haven. The elegant suits, lavish parties, and applause from thousands of spectators were all left behind in his twilight years. Jean simply wanted to live slowly with the woman he chose to hold hands with for the rest of his journey. The Hackman family had long prepared themselves for the day Gene would depart. Doctors had repeatedly hinted at his unstable heart condition and the old pacemaker that had worked tirelessly for over 15 years without replacement. Everyone assumed that when that day came, Betsy, the one who understood every pain and every gasp, would be the one to arrange his funeral. No one expected that when the Santa Fe Summit gate opened on the late afternoon of February 26th, they would both have quietly left together, leaving the family stunned by an empty, unexplained void. The first news of their departure came not from the police or the press, but from Leslie Hackman, Gene's biological daughter. Leslie had been the fragile link between Gene and the outside world for many years. Even though their father-daughter bond was not as strong as it once was, she still kept in touch by regularly sending Christmas cards or making short calls to ask about his health. To Leslie, Gene Hackman was not only a stern, difficult father, but also a towering mountain, a silent guardian always ready to protect her when needed. When Leslie received the call from the Santa Fe police, her hands trembled, and she immediately reached out to Tim and other close relatives. Her voice came out hoarse as she said, "They're gone. Both of them." Gene's departure was not the only shock. Betsy's leaving with him struck like a fierce storm, sweeping away all the family's carefully laid plans. No one knew how to arrange a funeral for both of them at once. When everyone assumed that saying farewell to Gene meant leaving someone behind to gather memories and the last remnants, Tim Hackman affirmed that although Gene lived a reclusive life, he was never truly abandoned or lonely. The connections, though fragile, remained unbroken. People often say that as one grows older, loneliness becomes a fear. However, for Gene Hackman, that silence was a deliberate choice. He never avoided anyone or harbored hate. He simply felt content in the small world of the wooden house on Santa Fe Mountain, where every morning Betsy cooked breakfast for him, and every evening she sat by his bed, reading the unfinished pages of her book. Yet now that house is nothing but a memory. Their silent laughter, quiet jokes, and the red Santa Fe sunsets on his salt and pepper hair have all been sealed behind the iron gate, giving way to silent tears in the corners of Leslie's, Tim's, and all who truly cherished Gene Hackman's gaze. Among those family walls, only silent whispers remain, words that were never spoken and will never be spoken again. The iron gate at the house on Santa Fe Summit was no longer closed, yet the secrets within swirled like a thick fog, obscuring everything and hiding what lay beyond. When the forensic team and police wrapped up their initial examinations, they quickly drafted a list of people to interrogate. Prominently featured on that list were none other than Gene Hackman's 3 biological children with his first wife, Fay Maltz, Christopher Hackman, 65, Elizabeth Jean Hackman, 63, and Leslie Hackman, 58, children who had grown up under the legendary glow of their father and then gradually drifted apart. When Gene began a new chapter with Betsy Arakawa, his second marriage caused quite a stir. The Illinois-born man had been with Fay for 30 long years, the woman who had weathered his penniless days and endured endless nights waiting for news of a role. They scrimped every meager paycheck from early supporting roles, yet when fame finally arrived, they went their separate ways. Gene continued his journey with Betsy, the piano artist, 31 years his junior, gentle and reclusive, almost the complete opposite of his once formidable strength and edge. Though no one stated it outright, it became clear that as the invisible distance between Gene and his 3 children gradually widened, rumors about that growing gap were nothing new. Hollywood had long whispered that after Gene and Fay divorced, Christopher suffered a prolonged mental crisis, that Elizabeth became withdrawn and rarely mentioned her father in scarce interviews, and that only Leslie maintained a fragile connection. Even she admitted that ever since Betsy appeared, her father's world had transformed into a forbidden zone where only Betsy held the key to enter. So when the police probed into the true relationship between Gene, Betsy, and his 3 stepchildren, no one was taken aback. These were the persistent questions that the Hackman family, whether they liked it or not, still had to face. Questions that, alongside raw emotions, quickly drew the attention of investigators. The Santa Fe Summit gate swung open, yet instead of welcoming light, it unleashed a torrent of darkness, with secrets cloaked in a thick fog that hid everything behind it. In that shadowy realm, every statement, every report, every answer was meticulously pieced together, all waiting for the day when the whole truth would finally emerge. A faint beam from a small window fell onto the cold marble bathroom floor, revealing Betsy Arakawa lying motionless. Her body was contorted in a half-kneeling, half-fallen position, her back resting against the bathtub, and her hand drooping beside an amber pill bottle. The bottle's cap lay unscrewed less than half a meter away, and small white pills were scattered on the floor as if dropped in a panic, one pill wedged between the tiles and another lightly clinging to the edge of a damp towel. When the crime scene investigators entered, the first thing they noticed was the unnervingly quiet atmosphere. No fan noise, no dripping water, only the faint scent of antiseptic mingled with the odor of a decaying body, a haunting aroma signaling an unannounced end. Betsy Arakawa, once celebrated for her elegant appearance and gentle demeanor, now appeared as a solitary figure on the cold stone on the far side of the house. In another room, Gene Hackman was found lying on his side near the edge of the bed, his old hand still loosely clutching his familiar walking stick. Nearby, his sunglasses lay upside down, the frame bent as if trampled or hastily discarded. These subtle yet striking clues led investigators to believe that Gene had tried to move, perhaps to find Betsy or to call for help, before his strength finally gave out. Amid these silent pieces of evidence, the focus unexpectedly shifted to the 3 dogs, the loyal, 4-legged companions who had stayed with Gene and Betsy in their final years. One small, trembling dog was discovered curled up under the dining table, its eyes red with fear. The second, an old Chihuahua, stood motionless beside Betsy's body, its eyes blank and emotionless, as if it had been standing there for too long to comprehend what was happening. The third, the smallest and frailest, was found in the bedroom closet, its body stiff, ears drooping, and fur matted with sweat and dirt. It had ceased breathing some time earlier, its hidden position behind a thick coat, further fueling gruesome theories. Police swiftly inspected the entire gas system in the house, but found no signs of leakage. The preliminary report also ruled out airborne poisoning. The air inside was completely clear, no gas, no foreign substances. Every indication pointed to a random and unusual outcome. Two people lying in separate spaces, less than 15 meters apart, with pills scattered as a final reminder of the unspoken pains of old age. But what really happened? On social media forums, theories spread like wildfire. Some believed that Betsy, in a moment of desperation, had overdosed. Yet no one could explain why John, who clung to every beat of his pacemaker, passed away soon after a medical mishap involving his heart medication, or whether years of isolation and smoldering depression had plunged them into mutual despair. These intertwined theories shrouded the house that once stood as a peaceful home. Then, even darker speculations emerged. Some asked if this was a prearranged farewell, a tacit agreement between two people who had shared their lives together, realizing that nothing was left to hold on to but long, painful days. Or, if someone had, intentionally or unintentionally, pushed them to that edge, an invisible yet familiar hand amid these unanswered questions. The haunting image of the cold bathroom, the open pill bottle, and the empty eyes of the small dog continued to haunt anyone who entered that house. A silent scene, but powerful enough to shake a legend. When news of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's mysterious deaths spread, one of the first and most widely circulated theories was that of companion suicide, a double suicide. Romantic, Hollywood-style tragic images were quickly spun. An elderly couple, exhausted after years of battling illness, choosing to leave together, holding hands as they stepped into the next world in peace. But in reality, what unfolded inside Jean and Betsy's house was far from romantic. James Gill, a renowned forensic expert who directly participated in the examination, immediately dismissed this theory with cold logic. Gill did not deny that companion suicide can occur, but he stressed that if they had truly decided to leave together, their bodies would almost always be found in the same location, on the same bed, sofa, or even in the bathtub, where they could hold hands or touch each other for the last time. However, Jean and Betsy were discovered in two completely separate spaces. Betsy had collapsed in the bathroom, while Jean was found motionless in the bedroom. The two were nearly 15 meters apart, with no signs that they had attempted to be together in their final moments. Moreover, the physical distance between the bodies further undermined the double suicide theory, and Jean's health played a crucial role. At 94, Gene Hackman depended heavily on a pacemaker, a device that maintained a stable heart rhythm during his later years. His medical records revealed several hospitalizations for heart rhythm disorders, yet there was no diagnosis of a terminal illness or any acute fatal disease that rendered his health fragile. The possibility of Gene intentionally choosing suicide became even more illogical. So what caused Gene's death? Forensic doctors initially leaned toward the common scenario of acute heart failure, a risk that can strike any elderly patient with a pacemaker. However, the precise timing of Gene's collapse relative to Betsy's death remained a huge question mark. If Gene died first, could the psychological shock have triggered a stroke or another medical crisis in Betsy? Or had Betsy passed away first, leaving Gene overwhelmed by despair, unable to cope, and then collapsing from exhaustion and panic? Another theory was quickly dismissed, that Gene died from dehydration or weakness after Betsy's passing. The evidence was clear. Gene's body position and the crime scene details showed he was still capable of moving his walking stick, an indispensable item in his later years, found fallen beside the bed, indicating he had tried to stand up. His sunglasses were discovered far away, perhaps accidentally knocked off when he staggered toward the door. All these clues confirmed that Jean hadn't been lying motionless for hours or days after Betsy's death. So what is the most likely theory, according to James Gill and the forensic team? The most plausible scenario is that Jean passed away first. He may have woken up in the morning, felt dizzy, and tried to move, but acute heart failure forced him to collapse by the bed. When Betsy found her husband, the shock was too overwhelming. Combined with her own history of high blood pressure, this triggered a stroke or reactive heart failure, causing her to collapse in the bathroom while searching for medicine or trying to call for help. Yet the exact gap between their deaths, whether 5 minutes, 1 hour, or half a day, remained a mystery. Why didn't Betsy call 911 when she saw Jean collapse? Was she too weak to lift the phone, or had another event occurred, perhaps an argument or an unexpected incident, before this double tragedy struck? There was no clear evidence to support a double suicide, though no one could entirely dismiss the possibility that Jean and Betsy had silently accepted their fate, choosing to leave almost simultaneously after years spent in the shadows of old age and illness, whose hand held whose last no one knew. Their deaths, whether by fate or cruel coincidence, tore apart every layer of secrecy within the Hackman family, leaving unanswered questions that no one dared to confront. The deaths of Jean Hackman and Betsy Arakawa should have been a quiet story of an elderly couple passing into eternity after long seclusion, but in an age where social media twists every perspective, no case can ever be simply closed. The successive deaths of both on the same day under the same roof, combined with scattered unusual details, turned that quiet villa into the epicenter of a conspiracy theory storm. As soon as it was reiterated that Betsy was the sole inheritor of Jean Hackman's entire fortune, social media split into two factions. One defended the image of a devoted wife who had stood by the Hollywood legend for over 30 years, and the other pieced together events into a dramatic murder scenario. Had Betsy, holding all the assets, been murdered to silence her? And if Jean had accidentally witnessed or discovered something, had he become the second victim? Conspiracy theorists didn't need much evidence. The bizarre death of one of the 3 dogs found stiff in a closet quickly became living proof for them, raising questions about what the dog saw, what it barked to warn about, and who had stuffed it into the closet before silencing it forever. Police confirmed that the bathroom scene where Betsy collapsed featured an open pill bottle with pills scattered on the floor. Normally, this might simply indicate a dizzy spell or an accidental drop of medicine while trying to take it, but online the story took a completely different turn. Had someone deliberately staged the scene, from the scattered pills to the unusual placement of the bodies, Jean's odd posture, his sunglasses tossed far away, and his walking stick left tilted at an angle? Conspiracy theorists labeled these details as evidence of staged suicides. In particular, the fact that Jean and Betsy died in 2 separate rooms only deepened the suspicion that they had uncovered a shocking secret, one so big that it led someone to silence them before they could share it with anyone else. According to the scene report, a portable heater was discovered in an unusual spot in Jean's bedroom. The family confirmed that Jean never had a habit of using this device, especially since the weather that day was not particularly cold. This perplexing detail made many even more convinced that a third party had entered and exited the house, leaving behind only vague traces to ignite collective imagination. One of the most bizarre theories emerged from the online true crime community. Had Jean or Betsy found a hidden camera or listening device inside the heater, sparking a confrontation that ended in their deaths? The scenario sounded far-fetched, but in a world where everything is monitored, who could be sure that investigators overlooked the sensitive details of Gene Hackman's financial ties and his will? Betsy was the main beneficiary, yet her relationship with Gene's 3 children, from his first marriage to Fay Maltz, was never smooth. Rumors swirled that Gene had revised his will several times in his later years, each time favoring Betsy with more preferential treatment while reducing his children's rights. While this might just be speculation, for those who hunt for clues, it served as the perfect spark to fuel further theories. Asset disputes, revenge, or even a staged suicide designed to cover up a long-term conspiracy. Police affirmed that the investigation was still ongoing, yet there was no concrete evidence to indicate murder. The most likely possibility remained that Gene Hackman died of natural heart failure, followed by the shock that led to Betsy Arakawa's death. However, in a case filled with fragmented details, unanswered questions, and tangled family ties, can the truth ever be that simple? Gene Hackman's life ended with a legacy of golden statues and immortal roles, but his final moments in his private home became the most elusive performance, one where every scenario was possible, where the public could direct the story of his life, and perhaps, like the legendary characters he once played, the truth about his death and that of his beloved wife would forever remain a mystery, suspended between reality and fiction, between life and the silver screen. Gene Hackman's funeral had not yet taken place, yet all of Hollywood began to hold its breath, not out of regret or respect, but out of a fear that strangled everyone involved. How many faces would appear? Who would dare to bow their heads in farewell, and who would hide in the shadows, trembling as they waited for the secrets Hackman left behind to be unearthed right in the middle of his funeral? Hackman was dead, but the game of power and Hollywood's darkest secrets had only just begun, right on the edge of his unsealed grave.